Hello and welcome to this tutorial where we're going to take a look at how we save our progress based on our checkpoint tutorial that we did before. So in this tutorial, what I want to do is essentially take the checkpoint system that we built in the checkpoint tutorial and look at integrating saving so that when a player leaves the game and then comes back, it will spawn them at the last checkpoint that they got to in their previous play of the game. This is so that you could use this to make some longer games or more involved games. And then you can expand on this a little bit further by saving things like the inventory or saving the state of other parts of the gameplay. So this is really like an introduction to saving. And a lot of this comes from the Tycoon starter template and also the adventure game starter template, both of which have got the saving and loading state part kind of covered. So if you like this basic introduction to saving and loading, then definitely have a look at those starter templates for a little bit more depth and a little bit more involved ways in which you in saving and loading the state of your game. This is going to be a simplified introduction so that you can get your head around what's going on and how you might be able to use it, even in a simple way, in your game. So to get started, I've essentially got a checkpoint system where when the user gets to this checkpoint, it sets this checkpoint as this is where you respawn if you die kind of position. And yes. And what I want to do is I want to say that this is where they respawn. If they get here, this is where they respawn when they leave and when they come back. So how do I go about doing that? Well, let's take a look. So we've got the basic system. We've got this user spawn script here, and this is in control of spawning our player. We've got this respawn script, which essentially says, oh, they've hit the death plane, then they need to be respawned. We've got this checkpoint script, which essentially says that the player has managed to get to that checkpoint and to set a new spawn point. So the next thing we need to do here is create a saving and loading system on our user. So let's create a script folder and we're going to call it save user, save and load. And here we're going to add a save checkpoint script. So this is specific to our checkpoint. We should probably call it save spawn script. And this might be where you could also put other scripts to save other aspects of your game. We're really going to just be focusing on the spawning logic here. So let's edit that. So in here, we're going to need a table of items to save. Let's have a look at how we do that. So the way we go about doing that is we need to create a table. In Lua, a table is essentially just an object that has data and possibly even functionality, but it's going to have data. And then we can use that table to save that data. And I'll show you what I mean. So to create a table, which is essentially a structure, self dot, and I'm going to call it save table. And then I'm just going to equal just a blank empty object. So this is now saying we've got an object called save table. It's associated with this script. So it's self dot, and it exists in memory at this point. So what we need to do is we need to leverage when the player hits a checkpoint, it sends the set spawn script to the user. Now this user save and load is also on the user. So we could even use this. If we put this as a function here, that will get called just like it's called here. Set spawn, it will get called at the exact same time. So save spawn script, set spawn, and the spawn point will be coming through as a locator. So what we need to do here is essentially add that locator to this save table and then save it. So self.saveTable. Now, tricky thing about saving stuff is that it has to be primitive data types. What that means is it needs to be the more basic data types. You can't save your entire terrain. You can't save entities. You have to save things like strings, which are lists of alphanumeric characters or words, essentially. You can save strings, you can save numbers, you can save booleans, but they have to be those primitive data types. So self.save table checkpoint equals spawn point. Now, spawn point is a locator, and a locator is a little bit too complicated to save. It will take up way too much space. So let's just save the name of it using the getName function. And then we can come back to how we load that and then find that thing at a later stage. So we're putting the name of the checkpoint in a variable called checkpoint, which is within this table here, which is in this save table here. So now the save table has a property called checkpoint, and it is the name of that checkpoint. So when the user hits this checkpoint 2, it will put literally checkpoint 2 in quote marks in this property here. To save this table, we just go self dot set save data. And if you look, it's expecting a table. And that's exactly what this is. By creating it like this, we are creating a table. Self set save data and self dot save table. And that's it. At that point, it's now saved that table. So it's saved the checkpoint name there. So that should run. Let us just do a print statement here, and let's just see whether this is working. Save table output saved. Yeah. Okay. So let's just check that's being called when we run into the checkpoint. Run over to the checkpoint 2. There we go. So save table is being called and it's saving a table. It doesn't give us our data. It gives us the address in memory. That's okay. So we know it's doing something. That's why we put that print statement there. So we know it's saving something. Great. Now, how might we go about getting hold of that data? Saving it is all well and good, but it's pretty useless unless we know how to load it in too. Our loading comes in a couple of ways. Firstly, we need to load it in before the player is spawned so that we can assess whether they have previously been in the game and saved a checkpoint. And if they have previously saved a checkpoint, then spawn the player at that checkpoint. If they haven't got any save data, they haven't saved the checkpoint previously, then we need to spawn them automatically at the beginning. So this is a little bit more involved, but let's go to the game. So we're going to create an empty game object, just a locator for now. We're going to call this game, and this might be where your game logic is already. So you might find that you can add this as a script to wherever is already storing your game logic, or you can add your own save game locator to hold on to it. You can do what you want, however you want to make it. So with that selected, we need to add a script, new script, and this is going to be a load game script. Open that. Let's edit that. So what is our entry point? So it's not actually going to be in it. That's the entry point when this entity is created, but we need an entry point when a user has been created. Fortunately, there is one. So function load game script on user login. So on user login, and then if I do open bracket, if I just finish that, it will tell us, look, that when this function runs, it's expecting to pass us a user. So that's super handy. We can grab that. And now we have a variable called user. which has got the user that's just logged in. So let's use that user to, So we're going to do user center scripts on load, and then we're going to pass in a function. We're going to expect the onload to come back with the name of a spawn point or nothing, or nil. So we want to ask the user, we want to ask any script attached to the user to load whatever state it had going on. Now we can have multiple scripts attached to that user that all have different data associated with them that we've saved previously. For example, your inventory system might have one, or your currency system might have one. We've only got this checkpoint system. We're keeping it basic, but basically we want to ask the checkpoint system to load in the last checkpoint. So we're sending onload to scripts, to the user script. So let's go over to our save spawn script. So this has currently got our saving state. Let's add a loading state. Save spawn script on load. So when this gets called, this will get called, open bracket, and it's passing in some kind of callback. So now let's load that data in. So we can do self get save data, and that's expecting a callback. So function this, and the actual data goes in here. So this is going to be our save data, whatever data we have, and we do self dot save table equals save data. So whatever we saved here with self set save data, we are now getting hold of that with self get save data. Whatever this was, self dot save table in this instance, that will be being dug out of memory and put into this variable here, save data. So all we're doing here is we are putting that back in here. So we're basically getting that out of memory and putting it back into the memory of while the game is running. That makes sense. Okay. Now that we have that, we also need to run this callback function. So callback, which refers to this here. So remember, when we do our onload, it's asking us to respond with something. So once we've done that, we've got hold of that data, we can run this callback function, and it's expecting us to pass back the name of the spawn point. So this is self.savetable.checkpoint. So we've got hold of the data that was stored. We've put that in the self.savetable. So now this save table exists again, and we're getting hold of the checkpoint that we saved here. Now, if there wasn't a checkpoint in there, then that checkpoint will be nil, and that's okay, because we can handle that, and we can say, hey, the checkpoint's nil. No need to worry about spawning at a specific point, just spawn where you would. Let's go and do that. So back to the load game script. So at this point, we've asked to load in any data that we need, and then we're expecting it to come back with some kind of spawn point name. So let's go and get hold of that spawn point. So we'll do get world find. Using the find method, we can essentially just pass in the name of any entity in our game world, and it will find it and store it. Couple of things first, though. We need to check whether spawn point name exists. If it does, then we will run that. Otherwise, if it doesn't, it'll hit an error. We also should create a variable, store that in, spawn point. It's a local variable. It doesn't need to exist past this point. Spawn point equals that. Now, if we get to this stage, we may or may not have a spawn point. So let's check if not spawn point. No, if spawn point equals nil, then. So if there wasn't one, if for some reason either we couldn't find it or there wasn't a name even to begin with. Set that to nil to start with. Okay. If either there wasn't a name associated in our save data, or we couldn't find the correct spawn point in this world, then spawn the player at their usual location. So to do that, let's create a variable here. It's just going to be our default spawn point. Our type is entity. And the, we need to do is a locator. Force it to be a locator. Okay. If we didn't have a spawn point equals self.properties.defaultSpawn. And now we've definitely got a spawn point, because if we couldn't get one here, we would just set it to whatever default spawn it is. Let's set the default spawn to start location. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Now the last thing we need to do here is actually spawn the player. So user center scripts. Set this as our spawn point so that if we die in the future, this will, before we get to another spawn point, we'll respawn at this one. So just like the checkpoint script here, basically need to do this. So user center scripts, the name of the function was set spawn. Set spawn, and then set the spawn point to this one. Spawn point. Okay. So user center script set spawn to that. So that will then go over to this one and set this up and do all this stuff. And then let's spawn our user. Spawn player. We can pass in nil for this first one, but we can also pass in a locator. That's our spawn point. So nil, because we don't really care what template, it'd just be the default template. If you've got a specific player template that you want to spawn your player in with, then that would need to go there. But the thing we're doing here is spawning them at that point. So this is our load script kind of done now. We've got, when a user logs in, ask any script attached to the user to run their onload function. When they've run their onload functions, they should run this callback once they've completed their onload function. So if in here, this is our onload function. And so it gets hold of the data. That's an asynchronous method. So that basically means that needs to complete, and it won't necessarily complete immediately. It might take a minute or two, or a second or two to run. So we can't run any code that relies on that data straight afterwards, because it might take a couple of seconds and we can't lock up the whole game waiting for that data to come out. So that's why we use these callback functions. Essentially means that when you've done that operation that might take a couple of seconds, then run this code. And then this code runs, and it essentially moves that data that we've discovered back into our save table in this function, in this script, sorry. And then notify whatever asked us to do this onload function. Tell them, yep, we've done, and here is the checkpoint if we had one. So going back to the load script, that's when this runs, because this also relies on this asynchronous get save data. So essentially, because this might take a couple of seconds, we run it asynchronously. We can't run anything from that straight afterwards because the data might not exist yet. So we run that function, and then after that function has been completed, it runs this callback. That callback refers to this function here. So this is like a way of using callbacks. There's like a really lovely structure of code paradigm to use in your coding, because it's a way of managing asynchronous events which don't necessarily happen one after the other. That's what now it's multi-threaded. It's on a different thread. It's going to be doing this thing. It's similar to coroutines in Unity if you've used Unity before. But yes, so there we go. We have our functionality, we're going down here, we're saying, all right, create a local variable that is currently nil called spawn point. If we found a spawn point name, then go and grab that spawn point from the world. If we couldn't find the spawn point or the spawn point name didn't exist, then just use the default spawn point. Remember, we set that in the entity editor down here. And then tell the user set the spawn. So that will run this set spawn. It'll probably also run this save spawn here. That's okay, totally fine. And then spawn the player. That's it. Let's see if it works. So we can test this. We can test this because I'm already at checkpoint 2. So now when I come back to it, I'm still at checkpoint 2. Let's make it so that we can get to checkpoint 1. On collision, let's make this. Let's copy this. Paste it here. Yes. And this needs to be on here. On collision, we need this. Save checkpoint. So we're at checkpoint 2. Go back to this one. So collide with it, fall off here. Should respawn on that one. Yep, I have. And now if I stop the game and go back into it, I'm spawning at this point. Run over to this one. Okay. So that's working. Close the game and go back into it. I'm spawning at this one. So there you have it. My progress is being saved. Depending on which checkpoint I got to last, that's the one that I will spawn at next time I open the game. Now, there is ways we can manage this data in a little bit more depth. So we can do things like having a version that we save it as, and then increment that number to clear previous data. But for now, this is the sort of the most simplified way of having this save data kind of working in your game. And now that we've explored the concept of how we save data and those asynchronous methods, you can take this away and you can save any kind of thing that you might want to save in your game so that players can come back and continue where they left off. So that might be their physical position in the game world, like we've done here. But it could also be things like what's in their inventory, whether they've unlocked a door, the last person that was in here could be their name that's on a billboard somewhere. Who knows? Whatever you want to do with that, you're in charge. You can do what you like with it. Hopefully it's been useful. Again, if you run into any problems with the tutorial, or think of some great ideas, some different ways of using it, or even some better ways of actually writing the code, then please feel free to jump into the Discord and at me and get into the general chit chat in there. There's a great vibrant community and everyone's helping each other out with this coding malarkey and game design malarkey and all sorts of things. So yeah, head over to the Discord if you want to give any feedback like that. Hopefully these tutorials are useful. I really look forward to seeing some of your games in Crayta, seeing what you do with the save data, maybe have some sprawling RPG adventure games. Who knows? Yeah, I look forward to playing all of them, and I can't wait to see you again in Crayta.